We're following this developing news. Long Beach police responding to the newly opened Marathon Burger in Long Beach. News Chopper 4 was up over the downtown area earlier today where we saw several police vehicles outside of the restaurant. Right there, you could see them. Police tape stretching across the parking lots as well as into some apartments. Today was the grand opening of that new Marathon Burger location. Plenty of people.
Families were lined up. Music was playing. Cameras were rolling. Then gunshots. Within seconds, a grand opening turned into a crime scene. Parents grabbed their kids. People dove behind cars. One person was dead before the ambulances arrived. And a business meant to represent Nipsey Hussle's vision of community ownership was suddenly surrounded by police tape and news helicopters. This wasn't random. Witnesses say the tension was already building before the first shot fired. Certain people didn't show up for burgers. They showed up for something else entirely. And when street politics collided with one of the most symbolically loaded business openings in recent West Coast memory, the result was devastating. The question that followed wasn't just who pulled the trigger, it was whether progress can survive in places where old conflicts still run deeper than any ribbon-cutting ceremony can reach. To understand what really happened that day, you have to understand what Marathon Burger was actually built to represent. Because this wasn't just a restaurant opening. Nipsey Hussle spent years preaching a specific kind of economics: buy back the block, create jobs, keep money circulating inside the community instead of letting it flow out to corporations that have no stake in what happens when the cameras leave. He built Marathon Clothing. He invested in real estate on Crenshaw. He talked about ownership in interviews long before it became a trend. Marathon Burger was an extension of that philosophy. Not just food, a legitimate business in neighborhoods that major corporations consistently overlook. A place where young people could get jobs, where families could gather, where the act of buying a meal was also an act of supporting something larger than a franchise. After Nipsey was killed in 2019, his brother Blacc Sam stepped forward and made clear the mission wasn't stopping. The first Marathon Burger location in Los Angeles became more than a restaurant. It became a landmark. People drove from out of state. Locals treated it like a pilgrimage. The message was simple: ownership still matters. That success built confidence. And when the decision came to expand, Long Beach made sense on paper. Strong culture, loyal community, West Coast pride. The Marathon name already carried weight. But expanding into a new neighborhood doesn't just mean new customers. It means new politics. Long Beach isn't neutral territory. It has its own identity, its own history, and its own street dynamics that go back decades. Certain neighborhoods are tied to specific crews. Boundaries are understood without being written down. People who grew up there know those lines by instinct. When a high-profile business connected to Nipsey Hussle expands into that environment, it doesn't arrive as a blank slate. It arrives as a symbol. And symbols attract attention. Not all of it welcome. The grand opening wasn't low-key. Celebrity presence, cameras, influencers, community leaders. That kind of visibility can generate positive energy, but it can also create a stage for people with entirely different agendas. In areas where long-standing rivalries remain active, large crowds become unpredictable, not because the event itself is negative, but because unresolved tensions don't disappear just because there's music playing and food being served. According to witnesses, the tension was visible before anything happened. A young man connected to a local set arrived alone. In areas with active rivalries, that kind of movement is noticed. He wasn't moving quietly. He began throwing signs, calling out rivals, making bold gestures in the middle of a family event. Kids were present, community leaders were nearby. The posturing was open and deliberate. People started getting uneasy. Because in environments where reputation and territory run deep, public disrespect doesn't stay ignored. It becomes a challenge, and challenges demand responses. Rival members who were also present reportedly approached event organizers, not to cause a scene, but to warn them. The message was straightforward: this cannot continue here. Blacc Sam was now in an impossible position. He wasn't there to referee street politics. He was there to open a business tied to his brother's legacy. But once tension spills into your event, you can't pretend it isn't happening. He had to make a call, let it escalate inside, around families, cameras, and children, or try to move the problem away from the center of the event. He chose de-escalation. The plan was to calmly escort the individuals off the property, keep the peace inside, protect the families, remove the tension before it became something worse. According to witnesses, Blacc Sam approached the group directly and made it clear there was no personal issue. Just that this was a family event and it was time to go. They agreed. From inside, it looked like the situation had been handled. Music was still playing, food was being served, the atmosphere hadn't fully shifted. Outside, everything was about to break. Once the group moved beyond the main property, they were no longer in a managed space. They were at the edge of territory where rivalries had real history. The business had done what it could. What happened beyond those property lines wasn't under anyone's control. Rivals reportedly surrounded the group. Words were exchanged. Pushing started. It happened fast and without organization. The kind of chaos that doesn't follow a script. Then, someone pulled a weapon. The first shot changed everything. Crowds scattered instantly. People hit the ground. Parents grabbed children and ran. Cars became cover. What had been a celebration filled with music and laughter became a parking lot filled with screaming. Gunfire doesn't stay contained. When one person fires in a crowd where others may be armed, the situation escalates in seconds. Civilians were hit, not people connected to the earlier tension, but regular attendees. People who came to support something connected to Nipsey's legacy of community investment. One person died at the scene. Several others were injured, and while it was still happening, some of it was live-streamed. Comments rolled in. Gifts were still being sent to the stream while someone lay wounded on the pavement nearby. People were watching in real time, engaging with the content as the aftermath of a shooting played out frame by frame. That detail said something uncomfortable about where we are. Violence has become content. What would once shock an entire city now refreshes in a feed. The algorithm moves on. The families who were there don't get that same reset. Police taped off the area quickly. News helicopters circled. Detectives began working through footage and interviewing witnesses. But gathering cooperation in situations tied to street politics is never straightforward. Investigations move slowly. Street consequences move faster. The Long Beach location closed temporarily. The Los Angeles location kept operating. Same brand, two completely different outcomes. And Blacc Sam was suddenly trending for all the wrong reasons, not because of what he built, but because of what happened outside it. The community was left with the emotional aftermath. Parents who brought their children to a grand opening now have to explain gunfire. Business owners celebrating a milestone now have to answer questions about safety. And everyone who believed in what Marathon Burger represented has to sit with the image of police tape stretched across a parking lot that was supposed to look like progress. The economic ripple reaches further than one city block. When violence erupts at a high-profile event connected to Nipsey Hussle, someone with security, celebrity support, and media coverage, investors notice. Other entrepreneurs notice. If this can happen here, what does it mean for smaller ventures without that spotlight? The people who lose most in that calculation aren't the ones arguing online. They're the families who wanted jobs, the young people who needed employment, the residents who were genuinely excited about something positive opening nearby. One incident can stall momentum for years. Blacc Sam now faces decisions that go beyond one restaurant. He can keep expanding into high-tension neighborhoods and accept the risks that come with that commitment. He can move future locations to safer districts and face criticism that the original mission shifted. He can increase security until the welcoming atmosphere becomes something guarded and institutional. None of those options are clean. All of them carry real trade-offs. And that's where Nipsey's philosophy runs into its hardest test. Ownership in your own community matters. That message is real, but ownership requires stability to survive. You can build something, invest in it, staff it with people from the neighborhood, and fill it with the energy of a movement. And one afternoon of unresolved conflict can threaten everything you built in a single afternoon. The Long Beach shooting wasn't just a tragedy. It was a collision between two things that can't seem to coexist in certain environments: genuine investment in community progress, and the street politics that have been running in those same communities for decades longer than any business has been open. Nipsey understood that tension. He talked about it, he tried to navigate it, he built things in spite of it. And he was killed on the same block where he built them. Blacc Sam inherited that mission and that risk simultaneously. Long Beach showed what happens when a community receives something worth protecting, and the loudest voices in the room that day were more interested in old scores than in what was being built in front of them. Progress requires more than opening doors. It requires enough collective discipline to protect what's on the other side of them. And until that discipline matches the vision, every ribbon cutting in the wrong environment carries the same unspoken risk. The music plays, the cameras roll, and somewhere in the crowd, someone showed up for something other than the celebration.